So yesterday I began, and I thought it was a good way to alternate. Began asking if anyone had a question or comment about this past week of practice here at the beginning before we start with our discussion. So if you have a question or comment you'd like to make, then maybe we can start with that. And also at the end if you have one based on the talk, but if you have something based on your week and your practice right now, then please take this moment to share or ask. Noble silence. Guess we are on retreat. We should practice that more. If something comes up, please don't hesitate. It's usually very helpful.
I have a little something. Today I started reading what the Buddha taught. I found it in my parents' library, and it's in Hebrew, and it's the first book about Buddhism that actually I'm reading in Hebrew. And I got to the notes from the translators, and they said that one of the reasons that they really felt like a mission to translate it was because of the fact that it is important for the Israeli or the native Hebrew speaker to hear the teachings in his or her own native tongue, because it brings a different level of connection. And to me, that really resonated, because I sing opera and I had to translate the arias, and my teacher always said, always translate it to Hebrew, like not just English, because then the emotional connection will be there. And I never thought about it when I was reading the teachings, and I always read them in English. And I was just wondering if, I don't know, I thought that was very interesting and very true, and something I never really thought about. And if anyone maybe that read a bit more had any experiences experiencing the teachings in their native tongue as opposed to one that you may be fluent in but isn't. It's just a little thought that I had today that I thought was very interesting.
Yeah, that's an interesting and probably important point, and a lucky find. I mean, unfortunately, from what I've seen, and I haven't seen as much as others here, the variety of translations is not so broad. There aren't so many out there, slowly accumulating, and they're very specific, this and that, and some Pali things, and some basic texts. But yeah, the vast majority is in English of translation. That's true. And on the one hand, it's important to have as you said, an emotional connection to it. That will help, definitely. And especially when some of the terms just intuitively make sense, you don't need to try to come to like your own inner translation of it. That's important. But you also might find that at a certain point, it's not as important as being involved in practice. And then even if it's in a translation, you know that the words are the words, and they're not going to replace your own experience. So the emphasis really first and foremost is on your experience. And the words are really helpful for that and to gain some clarity, especially intellectually. But the deepest emotional connection, if we want to use that term, will come from kind of what you do with the teachings. What you read is one part, but then what you do with them, how you practice with them, and on a daily basis, what you try to cultivate. That's the real connection that you'll make. So if you can find it in your own language, I'm sure it's very helpful. I just know from my experience, my Hebrew is not great, and if I try to read Dharma in Hebrew, it's more for me to learn the Hebrew rather than to learn the Dharma. So, so you should go with what speaks to you, but also accept in the meantime, there's not a lot out there in Hebrew. So, yeah. But yeah, I'm sure all of you have a different relationship with text and language. One of the first patriarch or ancestor in the Zen tradition, Bodhidharma, around the year 400, he gave a talk. It's called the Bloodstream Sermon. Bloodstream Sermon, so graphic. But I think it was intentionally. And it starts by saying a really famous statement that influenced the rest of all Zen history from the year 400 to today, which was the Dharma is not transmitted through words in scripture. And the transmission is not through words in scripture. And that's creating a real different relationship to the teachings. The teachings are not necessarily words. There's a living teaching, and that's what we want to access. So to make the living teaching is not only to translate the words from, say, English to Hebrew, or from Hebrew to English, or into your own mother tongue, but there's a more essential translation, more basic translation, and that's to take it from words into awareness, or into your sense of perspective, to turn it from teaching into transmission. Right? Transmission, kind of like, and transmission is actually an interesting word, because we think about the transmission of radio transmission or television transmission. And it's kind of interesting because there is a transmission directly from, that energy, and you get the image of the sound, right? But you're not getting the energy, you're getting the image and the sound. So what you have to do is you have to take the teachings in whatever language and make it into your own image. Make it into your own image, your own sense of self, of who you are. That's transmission. When it starts to become you, and not just sort of words on the page or in your mind. So that's a real translation, is translating it from words to life. So one of the amazing things of the teachings that the Buddha gave over his career was the idea of upaya, of skillful means, and that the teachings were and the talks were given according to the ability of the listener to understand it and be touched and changed. So, you have the same teaching, basic teaching of trying to transcend suffering and to, realize nibbana in our own lives. And that incredible teaching then is sort of translated and transmitted differently to each person that hears it. So what is happening there is also a sort of deep trust in the listener that he or she will be able to understand it in his or her own way and use it for good. Remember that one of the interesting things about the story of the Buddha after enlightenment was for a couple of weeks. In some accounts, it's like 6 weeks, or a couple of weeks, or 1 week. I'm not sure. Depends what account you read. This sort of refusal to teach, like, no one will understand this, until he was convinced by Brahma in one of the, teachings to, yes, be compassionate and help out. But initially, it was sort of like nobody's going to understand this. And then there's a sort of trust. Yeah, trust that they will understand. Trust that I will be able to, or the Buddha would be able to transmit and communicate it in such a way that will be translated accurately. Even if it's not in your language, but the translation and transmission, so that you'll be able to get to the heart of it. Even if you don't understand all the words, we need to have a certain trust in our own ability to be a translator. And here I'm using translation, meaning to translate the words into our lives, because that's the real important work of translation or transmission. And I kind of trust that you can do it. And that was sort of the theme I wanted to talk about tonight, that sense of your trust in the path. Your trust in your practice. And even to recall that trust in practice when it seems like you're not fulfilling the way you want it, and your commitments are not being fulfilled. And we've spoken this before, and I hear it often, that the more time you have, the less time you have to practice. For some reason. The practice doesn't go away. And your ability to practice doesn't go away. And remembering that on some level is a real important thing. First, we should think about trust as, the normal way of understanding trust. There's I want to explore the idea of trust here, and even faith, and how it's a real basic concept in our practice and in the Dharma. Even though one of the famous sutras, the Kalama Sutra, where the Buddha was passing through the city of the Kalamas and his tribe, and I brought this up many times, and they all said, like, everyone who comes through here says you should believe in us, and we're the right prophet. And they say, how do we know who? And the Buddha answered, it's right that you should doubt. It's right that you should doubt. It's proper for you, he said, to doubt. When you yourselves know that this is good, that these things are not blameless, that these things are praised by the wise, undertaken, that these things will benefit and lead to happiness, then you should enter into them and abide by them. You should do it. So there's a sort of one and that is the Buddha trying to awaken the trust in the Kalamas. Not so much doubt, although it is based on doubt, and I'll get to that. I'll refer to that in a minute. But really, the first step is, trust that you can know what's right and you can know what's wrong. There's a basic trust in your own conscience and your own moral compass that even in the confusion and delusion, and it's not awakened out of guilt or judgment. There's a samadhi there that when the mind is clear and aware, you see truth. You see the difference between harm and help, between samsara and nirvana, between suffering and release. Now that we can see clearly, we have to sort of deal with a lot of what is obscuring and clouding that clear vision. And that's where doubt comes in. Like, am I really seeing clearly? Am I really seeing clearly? Or am I acting according to a lot of my conditioning and my biases? What's comfortable for me, my own reactions, my unconscious prejudices. Am I prejudiced here? So that's what we doubt. We doubt even a lot of the conscious and subconscious influences that are obscuring my ability to be really open and non-judgmental. And from that open and non-judgmental place, that caring place that I referred to at the end of the meditation, we realize that trust in our ability to be true. It can vanish in a moment as soon as some of your old baggage comes into play. But part of what the teaching of the Buddha nature means, of the inherent nature of each sentient being, as the teaching goes, is that ability to aspire for the greatest goodness of all beings. And that means you can make that judgment call between what is harmful and what is helpful. Not based on my own personal preferences. My self-centered preferences, that's on the relative level. But on the deepest level, can we access that trust? And I can find some clarity. So one of the great poets in Zen, called Sensang, he has a classic poem written around the year 600 called Trust in Mind. And when he's referring to mind, he means the great mind. That Buddha mind, that clarity, that awareness, that depth, that conscience, that sense of aliveness and of being, of even goodness, that's underneath all of the layers of defensiveness and pain. The self-fear and anxiety. Underneath all that, there's a point. It's called the still point. And in that point, what is that mind? What is that mind? What is the mind that knows? So this is how Sensong, the poem Trust in Mind by Sensong, you get a chance to read it, it's really wonderful. But I'm just gonna share with you a couple of verses, 2 stanzas from this. See into the deep and dark truth of yourself and be free from attachment. See the 10,000 things as equal and return to your true nature. To abide in this world, just say, not to. Not to includes everything and excludes nothing. It sounds like an odd verse at first, but then when we reconsider it, first we can appreciate that nature that we have inside of us, that clarity, is deep, it's basic, it's fundamental. But it's also dark. Dark not meaning like bad, evil. But it's just not obvious. It's not obvious most of the time. It's in the dark. It's not revealed to me. And part of our sense of realization is not just realizing the nature of our situation here, or what my senses feel like and everything. But we're focusing on senses in these techniques of meditation in order to still some of the self-centered thoughts, to let them fade so we can see more deeply into the nature of the self, which is not totally, defined by all of these, all these thoughts we're having. And when we do that, as it says, it's being free from attachments and seeing the 10,000 things as equal. The 10,000 things is equal. That's a pretty interesting phrase. Seeing the 10,000 things is equal. 10,000 things referring to like all the different phenomena and all the experiences you have in even one day. And that sense of equanimity, when you can have a deeper sense of who and what you are, then you're no longer at the mercy of all the changes that are happening around you. And when you can touch that clarity in that silence, and you can trust that that's there, even when I don't see it, even when, as he says, the deep, deep and dark truth of yourself, when it's darkened and I don't see it, but I can trust is there. That deep trust in what? In your mind. That trust in your mind means you're no longer going to be swayed as much by external things, by the 10,000 things. I see them as equal. There's some that are pleasant, some that are unpleasant. They're always going to be happening. It's always going to be changing. But I'm going to trust something else. And it doesn't mean you are abandoning the world. The distrust doesn't mean I'm not going to be involved. It just means I'm not going to depend on it for my sense of truth and happiness. Why? Because it's ephemeral, it's changing. You can't rely on that. That's a teaching of impermanence again and again. So you can either look at it in 2 directions. You can awaken that trust in your mind and in your life. You can awaken that by observing outer phenomena as unreliable because it's so impermanent, up and down like a yo-yo. So by understanding impermanence, in phenomena. You start to seek what you can rely on. Or you can try to look inside your own mind and see through all the illusory and illusory thoughts, all the delusions of the self and all the attachments. You can see through them as they pass in your meditation. And you can find that clarity within the mind, within the breath, within your present. So either way, by looking in or looking out, if it's done in order to realize your true nature, then you'll find it. But if you explore the outer world looking for happiness, of course you're going to be disappointed, and we know that. But our old habits and our conditioning keeps putting us out there, expecting maybe this time it'll be different. We don't even say that to ourselves. We just behave in that way. So a trust in your mind means at the same time a doubt or distrust. But here I'm talking about a doubt, because we talked about it last week. A great doubt in all the other things that are advertising themselves as, the successful way to happiness. So that's the great doubt and the great trust or the great faith really go together as one practice. Doubting everything that is being told to me and that I'm telling myself, my small sense of self, my, needy and defensive and fearful self, that this will help me. It may temporarily, but, we want ultimate freedom. And ultimate freedom comes from ultimate abandonment. It doesn't mean I leave the world. It just means I no longer rely on it. Now, the type of trust that we can have is, there is on a daily level, there's a relative trust of when you experience it, it's not so mysterious. I trust that, in a basic way. I get up, I turn on my car and the key's gonna work, or I go to the gas station and I take a pump and the gas is gonna come out. Or if a car is broken and I need to get it fixed, I go to the mechanic and there's gonna be a transaction there and it's gonna work. We're gonna be able to rely on each other on that level. And all economy and all outer community is based on that trust. If I send my kid to school, I trust the teacher is going to show up and there's going to be material at some point in the future. And I trust that things are going to work on the relative level. That's how society is based. It's not based on just an economical transaction. There is a lot of self-interest there based on the trust, but it is based on trust. And I can distrust perhaps this mechanic, is going to cheat me, and so I'm going to lose my trust in this mechanic, but then I'll go to another one. And it may happen again and again, and I may not be able to trust any mechanics in the city. And I'll have to learn car mechanics. I hope I won't come to that. But I'm not going to lose my basic trust in that we have a transaction here that we need in order to basically survive. Now that's functional, and it even works in relationships too. There's certain trust. The trust that my expectations will be fulfilled because I'm basing it on my life history up to this point, and more or less it should continue. So that's relative trust. And as we say, there's relative truth. But then there's sort of what we call innate or inherent trust, or absolute trust. And that's a different level of trust. And that's the trust of Dharma, or the trust in mind. Right? It's unconditional trust. It's non-dependent trust. And it's not even dependent on past experience. Because sometimes your practice is strong, sometimes it's weak. That's not what it's based on. It's based on that sort of the central transmission that you received in the teachings and being exposed that awakened a spark that showed you something within yourself that is dark and true. And it's not something you prove. And it's not something you show. You suddenly feel a certain ease that it's who you are. And that's trust in mind, the mind of the Dharma, the Buddha mind. And when you trust it in yourself, you start to realize that that's what Buddha nature is about. And it's about trusting that in others as well. Then we start to expand that trust naturally. That, these people outside of me may not fulfill my expectations and worldly expectations. They may not fulfill my spiritual expectations, which are just some of my own worldly expectations put on a spiritual twist. But I have to translate the teachings into my point of view, which is all sentient beings have Buddha nature and are on the path to enlightenment. Because if I don't have that, then what am I doing? The Buddha Dharma is about becoming fully awakened from the delusion of a small sense of self that limits me and causes suffering to myself and others because of that limited view. The expanded view is one of Buddha or of awakened mind that all beings share. You don't have to have that as a constant experience or transmission to trust that. So when we're talking about this trust, the trust in practice, trust in mind, we're talking about something that is really the ground that our practice is based on. I'm going to read share with you a short passage from Hakuin, who was a Zen monk in the 18th century. He wrote a song, a poem about zazen, about meditation. It goes like this. It says, all beings are by nature Buddha. As ice by nature is water. Apart from water, there is no ice, and apart from beings, no Buddha. How sad that people ignore what is so near to them. It's so near that we don't see it. That is the paradox of our mind. And further paradox is that we can only really see it when we close our eyes and listen deeply to the sound of no sound, when we let sounds pass, to the thought of no thought, when we let thoughts pass. What is the awareness that can be aware of the thoughts? What is the awareness that can be aware of not only sound, but of the passing of sound? What is the mind that can taste the food, that can touch the object? What is that mind? What is this awareness I have? And so we start to trace it backwards to ask that question: who am I and what am I? And that's where we get to a basic trust where, there's nothing really external that you can define yourself by. But at the same time, you're alive. How odd. What an odd situation. some of the examples in the Dharma are about like looking at a chariot and saying, like a wagon, when does it stop being a wagon? If I take a wheel away, if I take, the post away, if I take the seat away, do I just have a pile of parts as a wagon, or when is there a wagon? It's a former wagon. It's a potential wagon. So when we start to sort of deconstruct ourselves and observe and say, okay, well, is this really me? Are those experiences really me? Who is the real me? And you start to find, most probably, that it's hard to locate one defining factor, especially because all of them are usually past. So we come back to a sense of curiosity, and more essentially, that doubt. And that doubt leads you to something real important. Hui Neng, one of the old teachers, around 700, he said, at the bottom of great doubt is great awakening. The greater the doubt, the greater the awakening. And so we can understand from that the more we doubt the definitions we give to myself and the world, it doesn't just leave us with nothing. But what is there? If I say anything, it's probably going to be lacking. And that's the point. What is it when you clear away everything and you have that quiet mind? Who are you then? Who's the person who's listening? And from that doubt is great potential. It's unlimited. As soon as you start defining yourself, you're placing up limitations. And those limitations are really useful. They can be. In the relative sense of a world of transactional trust, it's useful. I have, my abilities, my skills. I have my clothing and my car and my bicycle and my kids. I have my income. And I'm going to use that to, create a relationship of different needs in different situations. Transactional trust. Even with close relationships, there's shared interest, there's mutual interest, and there's self-interest. When we let that pause, especially in our sitting, you can and you should allow yourself to experience relief. Because no longer you have to be involved in transactions, but rather just calm abiding presence. And that presence, that ability to be here, to breathe, that's the activity of trust. There are a few qualities I want to open up this idea of trust a little more and look at 6 qualities of trust that we can be aware of at different times as part of our practice. One of the qualities that I just mentioned now was that of being able to relax. When you really trust your mind and yourself, and you trust your ability to be here, that means there's nothing to prove right now. And there's a sense of arrival, even if it's just in this moment for this sitting. I have arrived. So there's trust, and the first quality of that is being able to relax. Relax into the moment. You're safe in your own mind. Sometimes you might feel quite the opposite. Unsafe in your own mind. But the trusted meditation that you can sit here and you can be with the difficulty and with the comfort. And you can sit and observe and breathe. And even if it's so difficult, all you can do is count breaths from 1 to 10, 3 times. Or count to 3 breaths. The ability to stop, to breathe, to listen, and then to continue is a trust that you should value. And it means that you can relax in this moment. The ability to stop is the ability to relax and accept things as they are. As San said, accept the 10,000 things as equal. How do we do that? By sitting and breathing with this moment right now. That's how we do it. Even if it's only for 5 seconds. You can relax and accept things as they are, and then freak out. So trust involves being able to relax right now in this moment. Trust involves also a level of being able to find inspiration. So the next level is inspiration. Is being relaxed into this moment. That's one level of trust, how it's expressed and practiced. The next one is inspiration. You may find your practice limited at times. You may find you need to seek out inspiration. That's what the teachings are for. So to translate again, to use that word, the teachings in a way that inspires your particular life and circumstances. Inspiration is never general. It's specific. It's specific for you in this moment. You call upon it when you need it. Whether it's the stories of the Buddha, whether it's other great teachers, whether it's other enlightened or really evolved human beings you've met, heard about, or read of. Turn to those examples as inspirations for the living Dharma. Buddhist, non-Buddhist, come on. Where is compassion and kindness being realized in strong expressions? Use those not just to instruct you, but to inspire you. Inspiration is taking an example and having it motivate your own heart. That's what inspiration is. Inspire means like to breathe it in, to take it into you. Right? And it makes part of your spirit. Spire is like spirit and in is in. So you're taking that example and making it part of you, part of your spirit. That's the real translation, meaning transmission. So that's the other level of trust. If you want to work on trust, you need to relax into your moment. You need to find inspiration where you can. Maybe it's in nature. Maybe it's in art. Anything that awakens your good heart. That will strengthen your trust in your practice. And the more you find it, the more you will find it, right? The more you look for inspiration in your life, the more you will find it in your life, around you, everywhere, almost on a daily basis if you look. Find ways to motivate your practice and make them living ways. Okay, that's number 2. Relax. Find inspiration. Internalize that inspiration. The other way we practice trust is the word called confidence. Confidence meaning you've been practicing, you've sat with difficulties, and you can do it with this one. You've been in other times that have been more challenging or less challenging. You've met challenges and you've met them with some wisdom. You've met them with some craziness. You've maybe met them with fear. Confidence is saying that I can do this because I've done it. I may have had really hard times in my past, and I've sat with them to the ability that I had, and I will bring that into this. Easy or difficult. That's certain confidence. There's confidence in the teachings, but the confidence in the teachings are only relevant in as much as you are able to sit with them and take that time to stop and listen and to awaken your awareness into this moment that is aware of the depth and the dark truth of your own mind and not just the external messages you're receiving. Or as they say in some teachings, the fabrications, not how you're fabricating or creating this moment, but what you're receiving and how you're seeing it as equal, right? The 10,000 things. That's confidence. You've sat with many things, you can sit with this. So we have relaxation. Relax into this moment. Find inspiration. Look at your practice with confidence. And patience is the next quality. It's one of the paramitas, one of the great qualities. But patience is a way of cultivating trust. Patience is understanding on a lived way, in a lived way, that this situation and all situations I'm in, and the outside world, and other people, and the things that are happening with me and to me or around me are mostly out of my control. That's patience. I accept that most things are not in my control. I can work on the way I relate to those things. But if I try to change them to what I want, to my expectations, I'm probably going to get more hurt, as well as hurt others. So patience is that ability to abide in this moment and to accept that it's going on its own time. It's got its own time. It's not Daniel time. It's not my time. It's not your time. Patience is, it's going on its own path, and I've got my path. And other people have their own paths, and they're not your path. That's patience. That acceptance that things are going to go their own way. And what I can work on is my relationship to that. And finally, the last expression of trust is a sort of old word. It's called courage. 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 Shogyam Trungpa Rinpoche, he had an image of what he called the spiritual warrior, meditation warrior. But he made it kind of different. Instead of, he would express it as, he was a Tibetan teacher, he would express it as, instead of the warrior that can conquer someone else, this warrior conquers herself. And that is the true warrior. You can conquer your strong conditioning to relate to external changes through anger, aversion, and delusion. I can conquer that by realizing that is just harmful. That is harmful. By observing it and recognizing it as harmful, I start to weaken that conditioning. So it's not inevitable that I will relate and respond in the same way. But it takes patience to see that again and again arising, my habitual patterns. It takes courage to be able to face those, even though they may be, shameful. I shouldn't be relating this way. Why do I have this anger, anxiety, fear, and aversion? It's old karma. That's old karma. It takes a certain level of courage to be able to face your own humanity and the suffering that it brings. And to be able to relax with it. Trust is quite a big practice. In trust, we can face our demons. That's the courage aspect. We can let them go through my mind as long as it takes for them just to pass and see through it. That's the patience. Trust means I have confidence. I know this has come and gone before and I've been able to sit here with it. I will sit this time. It's confidence I can do this. Trust is inspiration. Many people have become fully awakened. It's possible. And with all that trust, I can then relax into this moment. Relax, inspire, have patience, have confidence, have courage. That is the practice of trust in the Dharma, which is trusting your own mind. So I want to share a couple of more verses with you, if I may. And then if anyone has a comment, you can ask. There are first one is from Huineng, who I mentioned before. He says, the great root of faith or trust is the belief that each and every person has an essential nature you can see into. even though you attain this belief, even if you think it's true, right? And I trust it, you cannot break through to total awakening unless the most basic and fundamental doubt arises. This trust in your mind as awakened can only be realized if you fully doubt samsara and the greed, attachments, aversions, and delusions that you're carrying from moment to moment that feeds the wheel of samsara. To doubt that as it arises. You doubt your attachments and desires are going to lead you to true happiness. You doubt that. And then you can rest and relax into something more fundamental. The peace of your own mind. Not the thinking mind. Not the worrying mind, but the aware mind. The basic awareness you have. The being alive right now. That who is alive. So the last thing I want to share with you, if I may, is a koan, one of the dialogues and exchanges done by Zen teachers and their students from hundreds of years past. This one is a famous one in the beginning of one of the collections. One of the students called Yang Yang asked one of the famous teachers, Joshu, who was the most famous teacher. He was the one who said, when asked, does a dog have Buddha nature? He said, no, I don't know where my dog is because it's good he's not here, he'll be offended. But that was Joshu. And in this koan, he is asked, if I come up with nothing, what then? They're always very terse. You know, if I come up with nothing, what then? Meaning, often you go into an exchange with a teacher, and he or she may ask you, so not just what are you working on or how's your practice, but what have you realized? Like, what have you realized? What's your truth right now? You know, what's your truth? One time, a teacher just stopped me in a room and shouted at me, give me a word of the Dharma. I had no idea what to say. I just went, I said, okay. He was being nice to me. And I spent so much time after that. I don't think it was so much, the point was that I would give the correct answer. But afterwards, I kept thinking for days and weeks what I should have said. Oh, I should have said this. If I had said that, that would have been a word of the Dharma. So what Yang Yang is saying to Joshu is when Joshu asked him, like, tell me, what is your understanding? What is your deep understanding? And Yang said, what if I don't come up with anything? Like when I would say to you, you know, what do you understand about your mind? What are you trusting? What is the nature of yourself? Who are you? Who are you really? Who are you? And Yang says, what if I don't have an answer? Like, I really don't know. I can't come up with anything right now. Does that mean my practice is useless? If I come up with nothing, what then? And Joshi says, well then, drop it. Just drop it. Yeah, drop it. Yeah. Drop that worry. Drop that worry. Relax, he's saying, just relax. You know, drop it. Like, what are you so worked up about? You know, that's the trust. drop all of this needing to know. You know, can you accept yourself in the world as it is? That's the drop it. Now drop all your ideas about who you are. Drop all your ideas about who they are. But Yang Yang wasn't satisfied with that. He continued and he said, but if he asks again because he does not accept that answer. Okay, but if I've come up with nothing, what then? He presses Joshua even more. So look, I can't just drop it. You know, this is my life. I'm trying to find out the truth. So Joshua replies, then go on carrying it. And at that, Yang Yang had a deep awakening. Drop it. Carry it. You know, your sense of self, it's very useful. Go on carrying it. Your sense of self, your thoughts, your worries, your anxieties, they're getting in the way. Drop it. Drop what you know. Carry what you know. This is where Sensang said, we say not to. We say not to. Yourself is not the problem here. But can you carry the self and realize the truth of your mind as one practice? So I'd like to invite us to finish this evening with a moment or two. If you have a question, please ask. And we will finish in a minute with just a moment to relax back into who and what we are, to accept, to take some inspiration from the Dharma, whether from tonight or from what you've been exposed to at other times. To let things go their own way, whether it's the situation we're all in, whether it's the situation you are specifically in, or people you know are in. Things are going to go their way, not necessarily your way. That's patience. You can do this. You have the mind, you're alive. You have the clarity and the depth. You have everything you need.